Welcome to Penn State Dickinson Law's Profiles in Leadership series. My name is Darrell Lim. I serve as the H. Letty Montauk Jr. Chair and Associate Dean for Research and Innovation at the Law School. This series offers an opportunity to glean insights from top leaders in their respective fields. In each episode, we invite these leaders to reflect on their journeys and share skills, core values, and qualities that make them the leaders they are today. Today, we're very privileged to have Judge John Jones. He's the 30th President of Dickinson College. He served as the United States District Judge, was appointed by President George W. Bush, unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate in 2002. He was born and raised in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, was a graduate of Dickinson College and at the institution that's now known as Penn State Dickinson Law, where he received an Outstanding Alumni Award. He also received an honorary doctorate in law and public policy from Dickinson College and was recognized as one of the 25 most influential graduates in the college's over 200-year history. He's also been named by Time magazine as one of its Time 100 most influential people in the world, and Chief Judge John Roberts appointed Judge Jones to the Committee on Judicial Security. He has presided over several noteworthy and high-profile cases, which we'll talk about in the course of our conversation. And he has also appeared as a frequent guest on national television, today on NBC, NewsHour, on PBS, C-SPAN's America and the Courts, and CNN. Welcome, Judge.
Darrell, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
So let's start right where we are, Pennsylvania. And so you were born in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. You were raised in Harvicksburg, Pennsylvania. You attended Blue Mountain High School, graduated high school, Mercersburg Academy. You went to, as we mentioned, Dickinson College, and then Dickinson School of Law. So what does it mean for you to be a Pennsylvanian? And if you could just relate it to each of those milestones.
Of course, happy to do it. My roots in Pennsylvania run pretty deep. Notably, all of my grandparents or great-grandparents were immigrants. They came primarily from the United Kingdom, from Wales, from Ireland, from Scotland, UK generally. And they came for a better life, as many people did, and they settled in Pennsylvania. Many of my relatives came to the anthracite coal regions of Pennsylvania because that's what they knew. They knew how to mine coal, and those skills were somewhat portable. They had pretty hard scrabble lives as they were growing up. My paternal grandfather, William Jones, dropped out of school in the 8th grade and became what was known then as a breaker boy. You dropped out of school to help support your family, and you literally sat by a conveyor line and picked rock out of coal. That was before there were mechanisms that would separate the rock from the anthracite coal. He pulled himself out of the mines by the dint of his own drive and ambition. He never went to college, never graduated from high school, became a civil engineer and became successful later on in his own right in the coal business. So it's an interesting kind of colorful family background. And he settled in Schuylkill County, and that's of course where my dad was raised. And I went to a very crowded high school that was during the sort of baby boom height, when there were too many students and not enough spaces in high schools. My dad had attended Mercersburg Academy just down the road from Carlisle, obviously, and so I always knew that was an option, and in fact went there my junior and senior years in high school, and it was a life-changing experience because I went from classes of 40 to 45 kids to classes of under a dozen, and sometimes far less, and received a wonderful education. Dickinson College was a a place that I had visited because our family doctor had sent two of his children there, and I had occasion to visit it on occasion. And of course, it wasn't far away, but far enough at that time, and I felt comfortable here. I also had an idea that I wanted to get into law. It wasn't a fully formed idea. It seemed to me that I didn't overthink it. You know, some students today overthink things. I didn't really overthink the idea. I thought, well, it's proximate to Dickinson Law School. That could be an option, and had a wonderful 4 years at Dickinson College. As to what was then Dickinson Law School, as you noted before the Penn State merger, what I gleaned, and I'm the first lawyer in my family, but I knew lawyers through my parents and judges, county judges, and in the case of one federal judge in particular, and most of them attended Dickinson Law School. And it occurred to me, and it seemed clear to me that if you wanted to practice it in Pennsylvania, and I figured that's probably where I would land, and you wanted a premium education, legal education, that Dickinson Law was the place to get it. It was just simply known as a really terrific law school. And indeed, when I graduated from law school, my first job was with the president judge of Schuylkill County as his law clerk, Guy Bowe, and he was a Dickinson Law School graduate, and there were a number of members on the county court at that time that were Dickinson Law School graduates. So it was a natural progression to go there. And you know, I clearly had a marvelous education. I vividly remember my faculty members and the times that I had in those formative years as you learn the law, which you know, every lawyer knows are sort of, it's a time of sort of discovery and revelation, and as you learn a new way of thinking. So that's sort of a comment on, you know, how I progressed through. And then, you know, I had a hard question as I graduated from Dickinson Law. Did I go for, you know, something more in the city? And I thought I had some options to perhaps go east and into the Philly area in particular, or I could go back to my home county. I wagered that I could develop a practice back in my home county, and that was my best chance to really succeed. And I had my eye on public service. Again, it was a very inchoate thought. So I went back to my home area, and that's where I started practice.
So that's actually a good place for my next question, because I was doing the math. You graduated from law school in 1980. You joined Dolby and Corey, which then became Dolby, Corey and Jones. Not too many years in between the date you got your diploma and the date you were named partner.
Well, you know, it was different then, Daryl, because you know, conflicts were understood, but they weren't as well drawn as they are today. And so what judges did back then on the county court is they had basically part-time clerks. So all of the term clerks for and each common pleas judge received only one clerk. They were part-time, and I remember this very distinctly. I was paid, I think, $12,000 a year as President Judge Bowe's law clerk. That was the going rate, and of course you couldn't live on that, and you were allowed to practice with a law firm. So I hung my shingles, so to speak, with two practitioners, Palmer Dalvin and Frank Corey, who were two practitioners older than I was, obviously, and they were kind enough to bring me into the fold. I was a very limited utility because I couldn't take a number of different cases, given the fact that I was a part-time law clerk. You wouldn't see that today, of course, but that was the way it was, and you know, they paid me well enough that it was worth my while and their while to do that. And I stayed with them as you noted, eventually became a partner in that firm. And then as the progression evolved, I took wing in about 1986 and started my own firm.
You've described this all very modestly, but I'm sure coming in as somebody that junior, you must have done tremendous amount or something to impress them enough to say, we want his name next to ours. What do you think in their minds that was?
I was a hard worker. I mean, I don't know that I was brilliant. I love trial work. What I did is after my clerkship, I think this is still true to some extent, but Judge Bowe was a great mentor, and he said, look, try to get a part-time job in the district attorney's office or in the public defender's office, because they're going to throw a file at you and send you into court. You're going to learn how to try cases. Made sense to me. My orientation, as happens sometimes, I thought, well, I'd be a prosecutor, and there were no openings in the district attorney's office. So there was an opening in the public defender's office, and I was hired for that, and instantly, began trying cases, and I loved it. When I was Judge Bowe's law clerk, I used to sit there, as clerks do during trial, and I just thought to myself, this is what I want to do. Let me in, put me in. I want to do this, and Judge Bowe was kind enough, and I used to do this with my clerks. When I eventually got on the bench, he would say to me, now, John, listen, you see what that lawyer was doing during closing argument? And I'd say, yes, Judge. And he'd say, don't do that. That doesn't work. Or conversely, watch this lawyer. They're fabulous at cross-examination. Take a lesson, from that. And it was, it was a wonderful way to during my clerkship, because I had a judge who wanted to make it a learning experience for me. So, I think I had a reputation as somebody who had some fire when I went into court. And then, I did things that other lawyers weren't doing. I was telling somebody this the other day. I started to have night hours. I would come in later after dinner, sometimes a couple nights a week, and I would see clients. Nobody was doing that at that time. It occurred to me, I always had sort of marketing in my head, and it occurred to me that, a lot of my clients were blue collar folks, as they are upstate, and they couldn't take work off to come and see their lawyers. And I remember one older lawyer pulling me aside after I started practicing. He said, listen, kid, you're going to ruin this for all of us. We don't work at night as lawyers. Well, I did. I guess, I developed a pretty good book of business pretty quickly and had a good following.
And how did that transition to the bench take place?
Well, it's interesting. I had some judges that really were wonderful to me on the county bench, not just Judge Bowe, the president judge, but there were other judges, and one in particular who became just a dear friend. And it was interesting because I was known as a Republican at that time. I started getting involved in politics later on. This gentleman, Joe McCluskey, was an ardent Democrat. And in fact, he was one of only two Democrats on the bench. But Judge McCluskey took a real liking to me. And he used to say to me, you should get on the bench. You have the temperament, and this was when I was in my early 30s. And I was flattered, of course, but I thought maybe someday I had pretty modest dreams. I thought I'd like to be a judge someday. The county bench would be the place for me to land, and it just didn't line up that way. There were some vacancies, and there ended up being gubernatorial appointments and so forth. So the path is circuitous, and if you'll just bear with me, what happened, and because there's a Dickinson law connection here, I was sort of at a career point where I wasn't quite sure, what I wanted to do, and this was in early 1992. There was a congressional district that I was in. It was the 6th district at that time. And the word was that it was going to get basically balkanized and divided up among other districts and be extinguished. There was a fellow who was a state senator from Berks County who was going to run. And of course, if it had been divided up, that would have been that. At the 11th hour, the district was sort of saved, although in a little bit different configuration. And somewhat incredibly, this state senator decided he wasn't going to run. So a bunch of the sort of so-called wise men of the time came to see me. And this was around February of 1992. And they said, "You're the guy. We want you to run for Congress." And I thought they were crazy. And they said, "Look, you're 36. You made a good account of yourself. You've been involved in politics. You're the perfect candidate." And I had to enter into very pitched negotiations with my wife, who thought it was, insane. And I remember thinking to myself, this isn't really what I want to do with my life, but I have the chance. I can get the party endorsement and so forth. So I got into the race, had a primary, took on a couple of opponents, beat them, and ended up in a race against the then county sheriff in Schuylkill County, Tim Holden. And in June of that year, a young congressman who was a rising star in the Republican Party came and campaigned for me. And his name, of course, was Tom Ridge, and a graduate of, as we know, of Dickinson Law School. And not only did he campaign for me, but we ended up spending hours sitting on the porch at my house and had an immediate connection. I don't know why. It was just, we connected. He came in again a couple of times, and of course the election happened in November, and I ended up losing by 1.5% in an incredibly close, hard-fought election. It was the year that Bill Clinton won, and my Republican bona fides were not particularly useful that year. About a month later, when I was literally sort of feeling like I was on my belly and I just lost a congressional race and licking my wounds, he called me one night, and I thought I was washed up. I thought I was, done with politics at age, by then, 37. And he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "I'm fine." He said, "No, you're not." He said, "I've been talking to people, and I hear you're, feeling sorry for yourself." He said, you think you're the only guy that ever lost an election?" I said, "No." I might later rejoinder should have been, "You never have," because Ridge didn't. And he said, "I'm going to be the next governor of Pennsylvania. I'm going to announce in January, and I want you to work with me and help me, and you have a great future." And that's all I needed. He got me off the deck, and of course he ran, and I was involved in his campaign as a volunteer and as a fundraiser. We continued to have a wonderful relationship. Again, he became really a mentor, and it was a thrilling thing to go through a governor's election, and he won. And he basically said, "What do you want to do?" And my pick was that I wanted to have a border commission, which would allow me to continue to practice law. He would have, he sort of dangled a cabinet post, but I didn't want to leave the law practice at that point. I had kids who were heading towards school and had a very successful practice. Well, I picked the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, and of course, I was nominated, confirmed, and made chairman. And that thrust me, because I took whatever work ethic, I have there, and really revamped the entire PLCB. I got new legislation passed, made it more progressive. He wanted to privatize, interestingly enough, and his frequent comment used to be, and he would say this, with respect, but he said, "I wanted to privatize the PLCB, and then I put Jones there, and he did too good a job, and I couldn't privatize it." So, we had a good run, and comes around 2001. I went on a trade trip. I went on a couple of trade trips with Governor Ridge, one to South America And as we were flying back, he said to me, because Mark Schweiker, his lieutenant governor, had just indicated that he did not want to run to succeed Ridge, and the election was the following year. He said to me, you know what you should do? And I said, you know, what, Gov? And he said, you should run for governor. And I wanted no part of that. I was already starting to think that I wanted to get on the federal bench. And I knew there was going to be 2 vacancies in the Middle District Court in some months. He really pressed, and it's tough to say no to a governor. And he always had some kind of project for me. And it was difficult because he said, I'll support you. I'll support you as my successor. It was noted in the sort of big dailies in Pennsylvania that I was kind of a dark horse, but coming in on the home stretch for the governor's race, but I ultimately declined it. Well, as things evolved in 2001, as things moved along, of course, 9/11 happened, and I had already gone through the senatorial merit selection panel and been cleared by that panel, one of about 5, and then everything stopped at that point because of, understandably, 9/11. There were no executive nominations. By the time I got to the White House to be interviewed by Al Gonzalez, this is another interesting story, which I won't belabor. You can develop it if you want to. But I was interviewed in the counsel's office by Al Gonzalez and a young assistant counsel whose name happened to be Brett Kavanaugh. Meant nothing to me, obviously, at the time. And those were the 2 who interviewed me for the judgeship. Well, by that time, Tom Ridge was the director of Homeland Security, as designated by President Bush, and was situated just 1 floor below. Went to visit him after I left the White House. I never asked him for any help. I just knew that if he could help me and endorse me, with the president, he would, and he did. Of course, I found that out later, and through that, and after a background check, I was nominated for the federal judgeship. So again, you don't know what the twists and turns your life is going to take. And I will say that one of the senators who sort of punched my ticket. There were 2 Republican senators, of course, at that time was Rick Santorum, also obviously a Dickinson Law School graduate.
We're just getting started, but already I'm thinking, Judge, you should really think about writing a biography at some point, if you haven't already. You mentioned that you wanted to be on the federal bench. What inspired you to want to be on the federal bench?
After Darrell, I went through a period as a mid-30s lawyer that I didn't have the right shot to get on the county bench. Schuylkill County, of course, was in the Eastern District, and it was in the interestingly, it was in the late 1990s, that congressional action moved it into the Middle District, and that was because Schuylkill Countyans had to drive to Philadelphia for jury duty, and they much preferred, going to Scranton or Harrisburg. And that was really helpful to me because the competition was much tougher in the Eastern District, especially if you were from upstate. So it was in the Middle District, and so after that period in my 30s, there was a vacancy. This was before it had been moved, and I thought, well, I'll get the questionnaire, and I got the questionnaire from the clerk's office, and I read the questionnaire, and I understand I'm about 35 years old, and I read the questionnaire, and I thought, I'm not qualified. I didn't even try. I thought that this is mission impossible. I need more seasoning. I need more experience. And so I never applied to be considered for a vacancy in the Eastern District. Well, then scene shifts. I'm in my mid-40s. I've got the seasoning. I've been in statewide office for a period of time, and I just thought this is the right time. There's 2 vacancies out of a 6-person court. I don't know when a vacancy is going to come up again. It was not a sure bet. I couldn't count it as a sure bet. And I knew even in the middle district, the competition would be intense. We had there were over 70 applicants for the 2 open positions. And the other one happened to be obtained by Judge Christopher, who we know him as Kit Connor, once again, a Dickinson Law School graduate from my era. And, I didn't have a wealth of federal court experience coming from Schuylkill County. I had enough, but I had a lot of trial experience, and I was sort of unafraid. I thought, I can do this. I'm a pretty quick study. I can pick things up, and I just went all in. I think my nature, Daryl, you can tell, I think, through what I'm saying. I had almost a calling that I felt like, being a judge was something that it fit my temperament, and I thought my demeanor, and it just felt like something that I was drawn to, and I was ultimately, and I think hopefully, when my judicial epitaph is written, and of course it's closed now since 2021, that people will say that I was a lawyer's judge, and a judge who made mostly good decisions.
Thanks. I want to talk about one of those decisions in just a moment, but I should also note for our audience that you were chief judge. And since this is also profiles in leadership, focusing on leadership, could you briefly just reflect on your time as chief judge and what leadership lessons you thought were most important?
Well, I spent over a year as chief judge at the tail end of my career, not knowing that I was going to leave, of course, and unexpectedly received the offer to come back to my alma mater, Dickinson College. It was in a very difficult time because I took over in early June of 2020, and it was right in the teeth of COVID. You couldn't possibly think of a worse time. We were just about to suspend all proceedings. There was no vaccine. People were literally dying from COVID at that point. We had many incidents where we had to close the courthouse. We were learning how to use all the virtual modalities that we're using now, for example, that are second nature to us, but we're all new at that time, to conduct proceedings, and it was just a really difficult time. So it was challenging, when you have, as we do in the Middle District of Pennsylvania, we have 4 different courthouses, or vicinages, of course, as we call them, spread out in a big land area, Williamsport, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Harrisburg. You'd have to ride the circuit and go to these different vicinages. So it was really tough. And by the time that I left to go to Dickinson in August of 2021, things had settled down, and of course we had the COVID vaccine and other things, but it's most memorable for just the tumult of that time.
Well, what saw you through, you think, looking back?
You try to be a steady hand. I remember, I always had a project going. I remember in the spring, after the first of the year in 2021, I had known Governor Wolf for various reasons, and I interacted with the administration, with Governor Wolf and his cabinet, when the vaccine became available and was being distributed on a limited basis. As you recall, it wasn't widely distributed in the beginning. I argued strenuously for court personnel to be vaccinated and to get priority, because the administration was setting priorities at that time. We wanted to get our federal defenders, our U.S. attorneys, our court, clerks, personnel, people who had to appear in court, obviously our judges, as we started to have in-person proceedings again, vaccinated, and we had some pretty good success doing that. So I just worked it. That's all you could do. And we had some fairly progressive ways that we set up courtrooms, but there was always pushback. Every judge is different, and it is not a picnic. I say this with love and respect, but great candor. Managing full boat Article 3 Type A federal judges is not necessarily a walk through the park. And although I got along with all my colleagues, I think quite well, they can be fairly demanding. And I don't know a chief judge or former chief judge who will tell you that they weren't relieved when they gave up the duties. Now, typically you give them up after 7 years. I gave them up after a year, but it is a challenging position in the best of times. And of course, I was there in probably the worst of times.
Now, 2005 is perhaps best known and related to you with one case, the Kitzmiller versus Dover case. In 2006, Time magazine named you one of the 100 most influential people in the world. In 2008, the American Humanist Association gave you the Humanist Religious Liberty Award. And Governor Tom Ridge had said in connection with that case, and I can't imagine a better judge presiding over such an emotionally charged issue. He has a mind that is penetrating, intellect, an incredible sense of humor. Reflect on that year and perhaps the year preceding as you were thinking about the issues related to the case, and help us to understand as a judge having to decide what he can call an emotionally charged issue, how you balanced the different interests.
Well, Daryl, I had been on the bench literally just over 2 years, and I was driving home one day and tuned into satellite wasn't prevalent then, and if it was at all, and I was listening to a Harrisburg station where I would tune in for the news, and they announced that there'd been a press conference in the Capitol Rotunda, and they described the case, which was a bunch of parents who sued a school district to enjoin the teaching of as an alternative to evolution of a concept known as intelligent design, that it posited that things were so exquisitely complex that they must have been the product of a designer and they didn't evolve. So I heard about this, and I've laughed about this since. I thought, well, I wonder who's going to get that case. It's assigned to my court, and of course I went home and I forgot about it. Went in the next day and I started up my computer, and of course you'd get the case assignments electronically, and I look in the computer and it's assigned to me. And I read the complaint and so forth, and I then that evening I said to my wife, I said I received this case on my docket and described it to her, and I said, if this case goes to trial, I said this could be really I think noteworthy and monumental, and her dismissive remark was, yeah, it'll probably settle, it'll never go to trial. So the litigation proceeded, and it became apparent as we moved into, this was late 2004, and in 2005, that it was going to go to trial. And it just started to garner more and more literally international attention because, it was held out to be the modern day Scopes monkey trial, a duplication of what happened in Dayton, Tennessee, except much more serious in federal court, lawyers lining up on both sides, and the case went to trial. We set aside about a 6-week period. Most days we sat and tried the case. It was a bench trial because they were seeking injunctive relief, so it was not a jury trial. We put the media in the jury box, and it was absolutely filled. We had overflow courtrooms. I remember arriving the day that we started the trial, and the front row was sketch artists. There were reporters from all of the networks that I could recognize when I took the bench. It was it would take your breath away. I had to really settle myself down to start the trial because it was the tension was so thick in it. And there was this, I've said since then, there was a sort of a palpable sense that you were presiding over a case that in its time and maybe even after its time would be historic. So we tried the case, and we ended up closing the record in November, and issued the decision in December, and I recall when we issued the decision, these are the sort of the revolution or the revelations, pardon me, of an upstate country lawyer who becomes a federal judge and is in the eye of the hurricane. So we filed the decision, and I said to my law clerk, let's turn the TV on in my chambers and see if this is reported out. We put CNN on, and within 10 minutes of the electronic filing of the decision, CNN broke in with that, sort of music that it's breaking news, and my headshot was behind the anchor, and they started describing the holding and the case and the decision. I remember my clerks looking at me like, what have we done? And it started, and what started was that I was on the front page of every newspaper. I was the lead story in the national news that night, and I still couldn't get my brain around. I thought, well, it's a story for a couple of days and then it'll die down, and it didn't. And it progressed and got me out speaking about judicial independence issues in the following year. Ended up on the cover of Time magazine, the Time 100 and so forth, and there were a number of books written about the case in the ensuing years that were published. There was supposed to be a movie. It never got made. But it was just this incredible period in my life where, I had this notoriety for deciding a case that for many, I think, particularly people who were in academia, and I know this now because I'm in that world, but they felt that I had saved science, that had I ruled in favor of the school board, and denigrating evolution in the process, that I would have set science back, eons. It was an easy call to make. The question was how to write the decision. I found in the end that intelligent design was nothing more than sort of the progeny of creationism and creation science. It was not there was nothing to support it as any kind of alternative to evolution. And of course, it bears stating, which that it was a case under the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment.
So you're Lutheran. Did you feel attention? Did you get any pushback from faith-based groups about your decision?
Well, there are sort of pseudo faith-based groups, and there's an old firebrand who's passed away now, Phyllis Schlafly, who fancied herself as a spokesperson for different religious organizations, and she came out of Barry Goldwater's age in politics and excoriated me and others. But in the mainstream religions, they don't. I mean, I recall the night that we filed the decision. One of my kids had a band concert at the local high school, and I ran into my then Lutheran pastor, and he came over and gave me a hug. And he said, I hate what people do in the name of religion. He said, good for you. And that was sort of the reaction that I had. But I did the most vituperative, the most difficult responses I had came from the evangelical community, the really hard evangelical community, not to my face, but there wasn't a lot of email back then, but by letters, and that unfortunately caused me to have U.S. Marshal protection in my family for a couple of weeks afterwards, because there were direct threats Yeah, obviously anonymous at that time, but they were the real, hard, kind of fundamentalist community. But the mainstreams, including Catholicism, by the way, they were very supportive, and there was no pushback from that area.
So that was one cause. Another cause that was talk of you having been considered for the U.S. Supreme Court until that decision.
I
Do
don't
you want to
think
respond to that?
I don't think that was true. Somebody made that up. I mean, I don't have any reason to believe that I was anybody's list for the Supreme Court. If I was, I didn't know about it, but that circulated. Lovely thing for somebody to say, but yeah, that wasn't it. And I frankly, Daryl, didn't aspire to even go to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a path some judges like. I was designated to that court on a number of occasions, and as you may know, if you do reasonably well in the district court and you take care of your work, you'll get designated up, and you get to sit with panels in the Third Circuit. And I thought that was a pretty awesome thing the first time I did it, until they brought a hand truck full of briefs into my chambers, and the work was incredibly intensive. I liked being a trial judge. I love the action of a courtroom. It was not fulfilling to me to cloister myself and just read brief after brief after brief. It's not what I like to do. And I enjoyed sitting with them. It was a great intellectual challenge. I was honored to do it, but it taught me that that was not a career path that I wanted to take. I was very happy as a trial judge.
So talk about the transition then from the bench to Dickinson College, where you're serving as the 30th president.
Yeah, the interesting thing was that I was chair of the board of trustees at Dickinson College, and long story short, our president, who'd been there 4 years, gave us very short notice. It was quite amicable, but she received a job offer and wanted to take it. Actually, her prior position as the president of the American University of Nigeria. And so I convened the executive committee of the board on a couple occasions, and we didn't have a logical interim that we could go to. And the options for sort of a rent-a-president for a year were not really robust. Out of the blue, one of the board members called me and he said, "You're it." And I said, I disingenuously said, "What do you mean?" I knew what he meant. And I refused. I said, look, I've got a life appointment. I'm chief judge of my court. I'm trying to get us through the end of COVID and blah, 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 the whole 9 yards. I gave him 10 reasons why I wouldn't do it. And he said, "Yeah, I hear you, but talk to your wife. We want you, and we'd love you to come. So leave the door open." So I said, I'll leave it open a crack. And I called a great friend of mine. I couldn't talk to my mates because I knew that they would try to dissuade me. They wouldn't be objective. I've joked since then that they would dissuade me because they were going to get my cases and double their trouble if I left. I called Larry Stengel, who'd been the chief judge on the U.S. District Court in the Eastern District, and he'd left a couple years before to go practice as senior counsel to Saxon and Stump, a great law firm. And I said, "Larry, I can't talk to my mates, but I can talk to you. He's a good friend." I said, "I've got this offer and I don't know what to do." And he said, "John," he said, your temperament is perfect to be a college president." He said, "Something I always wanted to do, but haven't had the chance to do." He said, "You have to remember two things." I said, "What's that, Larry?" He said, "Number one, you're going to lose your superpowers once you step off the bench. And number two, people aren't going to genuflect when you walk into a federal courthouse." He said, "Can you handle those things?" I said, "Well, we'll see, won't we?" I said, I think that I can. And so imbued with that and a couple of days of really intensive deliberation and soul searching and thought, I thought I'm never going to have this opportunity again. I had almost 20 years on the bench, at that time. And I confess, Daryl, that it was starting to become a little repetitive, and sentencing people to prison, unless you're soulless, and I'm not, it starts to wear on you over time. And I just thought, well, this is a new adventure, I had my time. And So somewhat fearlessly, I plunged into it. I think the biggest thing about the transition is that, you go from, you're the law, and you are the sort of king of your domain. And as I frequently used to invoke, have the best seat in the house, and people, they can be obsequious, but they're also aware of your position, to, academia, where the power of persuasion is much more useful than firing edicts. And the example I have given since then, is I was running faculty meetings by Zoom. They're in person now, but they were still Zoom because of COVID. And I used to move them along, and some faculty members had a tendency, under the guise of questions, to make long addresses, and I would say, "Well, do you have a question?" And essentially, I was running faculty meetings like I was like a hot bench during oral argument, and the parliamentarian of the faculty very gently sort of chided me in an email and said, "Look, you're violating Robert's rules, and you and you have to let the faculty members talk, even if it's if it's a meandering sort of an address." And I issued a broad mea culpa to the faculty, and sort of hilariously, I had a bunch of faculty members come to me and said, "We like the way you run the meeting." Well, you can't please everybody, but it was a lesson to me, that I had to recalibrate, and I have, and I did, and I think in year
Did you
3,
think of overruling that rule?
you have that sort of 20 years of being the guy who cuts off the questioning or the debate. You can get hardwired. I mean, I like to think that I'm a pretty amiable fellow, but you sort of pick up the traits of the job that you're in at that point. But you know what, Daryl, it's I'm entering year 4 of my presidency. There's a humbling aspect to it. I don't know, I think it's refreshing to me. This may sound completely stupid, but you sometimes as a judge, you get sick of yourself. You're listening to yourself talk, and you're thinking, okay, fine, get off your high horse. As Tom Ridge characterized, I have an abundant sense of humor. I see humor in virtually everything. And it helped me during the bench. It helped me ease tension. I was known for a quip during sidebar. I take my job seriously, but I don't take life that seriously. And I love what I do now. I feel really, really blessed. You talked earlier about writing a book. The life I've had, and the things I've seen, to me are, I just feel really blessed. This is an interesting experience. And of course, now, in addition to everything else, as you probably know, I've become this spring, by sort of happenstance, during the hush money trial for former President Trump, I became a talking head. I've done over a dozen appearances on Anderson Cooper. I've done MSNBC. I've done News Nation, with Dan Abrams. So, and that's great fun to do, and I'll suspect I'll do more of it. So, all good. It's these are interesting times, and I feel unfettered too. I have the ability to comment on things that, of course, I couldn't have and shouldn't have under my code of conduct when I was on the bench. So I'm a little bit unleashed, and that's very refreshing as well.
I want to talk about what happened this spring, and take us through your thought process as president of Dickinson College. The first was, of course, the protests in the wake of the conflict in Gaza. And at Dickinson College, just like many other places, there were tents, there were student protesters, there was a lot of tension. The second was more recently towards commencement, involving a commencement speaker, Michael Smearcornish. And it was noted that you mentioned during the commencement ceremony, and I quote, "I implore all of you to keep engaging with those with whom you disagree in every sphere of your lives. Do so respectfully." So you had stepped off the bench to avoid conflict, I suppose, in some ways, and here you find yourself as president in the middle of two, suppose, national level events that have seeped into the campus. So how did you process that? How did you decide what was the right way to respond?
Well, it's not my first controversy, and you don't love them, but you have to try to be a steady hand. And if you melt down as the leader, everybody around you goes to pieces. And there are people who can handle these things that are on my team, and others that run around with their hair on fire. And you have to present a calm look. Since October 7th of last year, which was the day of the Hamas atrocities. It was a very tough semester because the campus was on edge, as many campuses were. I could see that we were angling towards an encampment. In fact, we got one in May, and I didn't. The considered tack that I took was not to move it out, but to try to deal with it as best that I could. As an ancillary matter, we had invited Michael Smerconish, who I've known for 25 years, to campus. And what happened was they mined his record, the protesters, and they found that he wrote a book called Flying Blind in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, wherein he said that he thought that young Arab males should be profiled because they look like terrorists. It was a product of its time. Former Senator Specter wrote the foreword to the book. I mean, it was not controversial in its time. Well, in this time, it makes him look like he's Islamophobic. And I alerted Michael, who, as I said, I knew, to the controversy. And unfortunately, what he did is he went on his radio show and he doubled down. And we had a 19-year-old student who wrote an op-ed, very respectful, a student of Arab descent. And, she said we shouldn't have him as the speaker. And he not only did he mock her on his Sirius satellite radio show, but he also published her op-ed on his webpage and disclosed her personal information, personally identifiable information by doing so, which I thought was a terrible breach. And even though, in another, had none of that happened, I would have stood up for Michael as the commencement speaker, but I had no choice in my mind but to advocate to pull him down. The board agreed with me. I lost a friend through that, but those are the judgment calls that you have to make. So I made remarks during commencement in lieu of a commencement speaker, and the quoted line is one of the things that I said. I wanted to put a capstone on it. I didn't want a demonstration during commencement because that graduating class 4 years ago, when I graduated from high school, of course, it was COVID, and they didn't have a commencement, and I wanted to have a joyous occasion. Some people disagreed with me. Some people did. I didn't try my case with Smerconish in the press, so a lot of people didn't know the things that I just said to you. I just didn't want to get into a fight over that. I had to kind of swallow hard and do what I had to do. That's all background stuff, and it made no sense. And getting into a fight with a guy who's got a microphone is I learned that a long time ago. It's not a smart thing to do. So we weathered it, and we ended on a high note. The encampment was taken down, well before commencement. I had a dialogue with the students. It's what I think presidents have to do. The world is still in tumult, as you well know, and I don't know what this coming year will bring. These are tough jobs, whether you're the president of Columbia or Penn, or ex-president, is a case, I guess, of Penn and MIT, Harvard, and so forth. I think, at Dickinson, we did the best we could, and I think we ended in a good place. But it was certainly the most challenging semester I've had since I've been here.
I want to ask you about a couple of alumni. If you had Abraham Lincoln, if you had, I suppose, Thomas Jefferson as your alumni, you probably have statues of them, paintings of them. You have James Buchanan and you have Roger Taney. Now, both of them notable in their own right, 15th President of the United States, second longest serving Justice of the Supreme Court, but both linked to one decision, Dred Scott, which defined their legacy. Both of them alumni of Dickinson College. What do you do with that as president?
Well, you try not to talk. you try not to talk about him very much. You know, Tawny rendered a dreadful decision, and apparently was not a particularly nice guy. Besides that, I'm not a Tawny scholar, but you know, even in his time, I think he was an interesting study. You know, Buchanan. I've read a lot about Buchanan, and we don't use him as an exemplar of Dickinson either. Obviously, he avoided the seminal question of the time, which was slavery, and he ducked it. He got out, before things began to collapse. Maybe he was the worst president. I don't know. I'm not in a position to say of all the presidents we've had, but there were some accomplishments by Buchanan. The sad fact is he ducked the biggest issue of his time. So they're here. We prefer to talk about some of our more recent alums and people like Judy Faulkner, who graduated in the mid-60s and started Epic Systems, which is the largest medical platform in the world, had billions and billions of dollars. She started her basement with $75,000. Folks like that, Steve Smith, who's the CEO of LL Bean. We have plenty of not worldwide known alums, but who are fantastic people. And then we talk a lot about Benjamin Rush and John Dickinson, who were not Dickinson graduates, obviously, but they were the founders of Dickinson, and the sort of the wellspring of what it is that we do, and they were the architects of this new kind of education in the United States. But you accept alums, warts warts and all, and those are two that we perhaps wish that we didn't have, but you have to deal with it.
So as you look to the next academic year and perhaps even beyond, what would you like your legacy at Dickinson College to be defined by?
When I took over, Darrell, in 2021, between COVID and the fact that we had a 4-year presidency, an interim presidency with our provost stepping in, and literally a failed presidency before that, a 3-year presidency, following a long, successful presidency, I think we lost our momentum. We lost our spirit. Our narrative was very mixed, at that point. I pretty confidently can say after 3 years that I've returned momentum to the college. I think the vibe is good here. We've done really well programmatically. I have a great new provost who's just getting it done in terms of revamping, some of our academic areas, adding programs like we have next week we'll announce an Institute for the Global Economy that was underwritten by an alum, largest donation in support of an academic program in the college's history. We expect to have more programs like that. The challenge, Darrell, is to be distinctive in the marketplace. Using a word that is used in the legal area, there's a fungibility aspect among premium liberal arts colleges that Gettysburg is the same as Dickinson, is the same as F&M, is the same as Bucknell, is the same as Lafayette, and unless you distinguish yourself, you fall victim to what college gives prospective students the best deal. I'm very bullish on our future. I told the board when I took this job in 2021, I said, "You're not hiring a placeholder. I'm not here to go on cruise control at the end of a judicial career. I'm here to to make a difference. I work at this job really hard every day." So this sounds trite, and I don't mean it to be, but when I take my leave after however many years, and I've got gas in the tank, I expect to be doing this for a while. But when I leave, if I've left this place better positioned in the marketplace, healthy, you have to run it like a business. I know that's anathema to some people in academia, but you do. You got to pay the bills. You don't want to be running deficits and so forth. If I leave a healthy great educational institution, which is Dickinson's legacy, then, you know, I'll consider my presidency to have been successful.
And speaking to prospective students, what is distinctive about the Dickinson College brand?
Well, we hold true to our liberal arts background, and I think that's important. Increasing literacy. I think if you can't express yourself verbally and in writing in this world, you get nowhere. And I think we still do that better than so many different places. We stick to that core liberal arts education, but the distinctiveness comes in things like data analytics. We're leaning into AI, which I think is really topical and something that we don't want to run from. We want to make sure that we teach that, we embrace it. The institute that I just described, a huge thing. We're cutting edge in international business and management. We just, for example, if you go into the pre-med area, we obtained cadavers in connection with actually Hershey Med, which is, you know, part of Penn State. We actually have cadavers here. So if you take anatomy instead of doing virtual, dissections in anatomy, you're going to work with a real cadaver. Things like that get you noted in the marketplace, and I really believe in our faculty. I think we have a world-class faculty. They're passionate about what they do, and I don't think every institution can claim that, and that's part of it. And you know, it's just, I think, a personal touch. I always tell our prospective students, you come to Dickinson, and this is absolutely true fact, you will be able to email the president directly. Believe me. Every day I get emails, and every day from students and from parents, and I answer those emails. And I think that's what you pay for and what you expect in a premium college like liberal arts college like Dickinson. However, you don't get that every place, and it's that personal touch, sort of concierge approach to education that I think keeps lifting us up.
Thanks. Last word to you, President Jones, Judge Jones. Thank you for your time. What final thought would you like to leave with our listeners?
Well, the final thought is, Dickinson Law School, Penn State Dickinson, helmed by my great friend Dean Conway, and with your great teaching, is a superb institution. I spent 7 years as an adjunct and loved it there, and I'm so impressed with what I see at the law school. So I wish my alma mater, of which I am incredibly proud, continued success. I see every day the great lawyers. I don't have a son or a daughter who's a lawyer, but my son-in-law, who was editor of the Law Review, Eric Prock, years ago, is a proud graduate of Dickinson, of Penn State Dickinson. So we've kept it in the family, and I hope that one of my grandkids someday will have the great good fortune to attend as well.
Yes, and I hope our shared success and your shared success will be a shared success that we both can enjoy, with common programs and opportunities to collaborate in future. After all, we are right across from each other.
Well, and of course, Dickinson College had as you probably know, had a law division that became the law school. Yeah. And so we sort of have a common heritage as we go back, and I feel that, and I think that's important, and I'm delighted that you and Dean Conway and others continue to foster that affiliation, and I'm so proud that I came from the law school, and I've always felt that way.
And I'm so proud that you are still keeping in touch with us, and we hope to do more with you in future. And this is just one of many examples to come. So thank you again, President Jones, Judge Jones, for all that you have done, your service, and we look forward to the next chapter, the next semester of your time at Dickinson College.
Well, I wish you every continued success, and again, it was an honor and a privilege. Thank you, Darrell, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Judge.
Take care.